It was one of the most high-profile murders of an environmental activist in recent memory. The death of 44-year-old Berta Caceres sparked international condemnation and an investigation that's lasted more than 2 years. 8 men are now set to stand trial over her death. She was shot and killed in her home in 2016. Caceres led a campaign of indigenous activists to protest the construction of a hydroelectric dam on the Sarca River, a waterway in Honduras that's considered sacred to the Lenca people. At least 2 of the men charged with Caceres' murder are connected to the DESA Corporation, the company behind the Sarca River project. The DESA Corporation has denied any involvement in the murder, but the family of Berta Caceres says the investigation has been full of irregularities and say they worry the trial won't produce a just outcome.
Right now, the Honduran government is holding on to approximately a terabyte of evidence that they have not handed over to the prosecution. Right now, the prosecution has about 50 gigabytes. That is a massive amount of evidence that has not been released or even looked at by the Honduran government.
Berta Caceres was the recipient of the prestigious Goldman Environmental Prize. It's believed that her activism is what led to her murder. But cases like these, where activists are targeted and killed, are quite common in Honduras. Human rights groups note the country has one of the highest rates of murders of environmental activists anywhere in the world.
Most of the human rights defenders that are killed around the world are based in our region. I mean, we have the largest number of human rights defenders who've been killed, and Honduras, unfortunately, is on top of the list. In Honduras, since 2009, more than 150 human rights defenders have been killed.
Allegations of evidence tampering in the investigation have sparked protests, and friends and family of Berta Caceres say they continue to face threats of violence or death for continuing her work. Prosecutors believe that by uncovering who gave the order to kill Berta Caceres, a precedent could be set that might help protect other environmental activists from suffering her same fate. Manuel Rapalo, Al Jazeera, Washington.